Our next round is going to be on Twin Rivers. It is between Cabbage and Massive, of course, symmetrical Aeon, as every single round in this entire tournament is going to be. The map is Twin Rivers. The right-hand side belongs to Cabbage, and the left belongs to Massive. Looks like Massive may actually be going for either first and second air, or hold on. First air, so he's rushing a bomber. And then we've got a land factory planned a little bit later on. He did cancel the second land factory, I think, because he accidentally queued a second air thinking it was a land. So 2 power generators, then the bomber will usually get you away without a stall, or at least too hard of a stall. That is going to put him at a very good early advantage, because you can use that bomber basically like you would an incredibly fast flare. It can fly across the map, it can kill off a couple of expansioneers, slow down your opponent's expansion, but that comes at the cost of your own expansion. So your engineers are going to be out much later. You're not going to have much mass in the early portion of the game. Basically, you got to try to deal as much damage as possible to make it worth that first bomber. Cabbage is dropping a third T1 power generator after the land factory and then building his mass extractors. I don't think this is a particularly good method of building this stuff because he was assisting with that early engineer, but now we do see it moving out to grab a couple of mass extractors on the other side, some manual reclaim, and the first engineer moving out for the mass extractors on the front line. We also do have a flare heading across the map that could potentially cause a little bit of a problem for Massive because he won't have an early tank online due to, well, you know, not having a land factory. So the engineer that he does build to try and go and claim the right side will run directly into this flare. So bomber is away. We got a T1 air scout heading out in front to gather intel, select some targets for that bomber to kill. I don't see any move orders, but hopefully, Cabbage knows exactly what is going on and has tried to preempt the bomb with some engineer micro, but he is going to be just a little bit slow on the drop, or on the turn, and the drop is going to get him. Then we got another bomb that is going to make a wide miss after a turn from Cabbage. I see all the B's there, and I think that might be a little bit of fun to have with that name. Massive is finally finishing off his first land factory as his first group of engineers continues to reclaim. We do have an anti-air out for Cabbage now that is going to land a few hits on that bomber, but the bomber is going to remain and not score a kill on the engineer. So Massive is getting incredibly unlucky with this first T1 bomber, though it does have 2 engineer kills. It did not slow down the expansion to a great degree. And Cabbage is getting his second air online, and he is queuing up for a second land factory. And more flares for some reason. I am not sure what that reason is. Maybe he assumes that there's no tanks on the other side, and he is going to try to do a little bit more early raiding. Massive popping out a scout and a couple of flares to try and pick off the combat unit that he knows is over that away. And he is going to be moving his ACU into the right-hand flank. A very good strategic decision because it will provide a bit of protection for that exposed flank. He's obviously going to have to wait for more land factories to come online in order to contest the map, but at least he can protect the core group of 4 mexes on the right side. 2 land factories already up, third going down for Cabbage. Looks like he's got 1 engineer on power, 1 engineer on factory build. On 17 mass per tick, I would definitely be getting a second engineer on the power, I think. Although this may end up being a strong land spam build. I tend to think that tech is a good idea on Twin Rivers because if you can get the map locked down well enough with T1 tanks, if you can move to T2 and then possibly to Tier 3 as Aeon, Harpy Rush is always a good thing. You'll be able to make a lot of progress, but Twin Rivers usually does see earlier T2 mass extractors than a lot of other 1 versus 1 maps do. However, it looks like Cabbage is going for the strong spam option. More power to him if he can make it work. On the south side, it looks like we've got a third land factory finishing under the power of 3 engineers. And then we got a few more power generators queued and then a 4th land factory. So that is going to be a little bit behind what Cabbage has put online, but it does look like Cabbage has canceled out his next queue for T1 land factories. Looks like he is resuming on the left side though. That's all going to be built with the ACU. He did not place any move orders to mitigate his walking time. So that is one of those little things that you see between, that makes the difference between ranks a little bit higher than the mid-range. Your average Joes, you know, your middle tier players are going to be about 1,000 to 1,200 rank. And you're going to see a lot of stuff like this happening around there. And then that little bit of extra APM that lets you place the waypoint. Actually, I take that back. Massive isn't doing it either, but these are engineers, so I guess that can be a little bit more readily excused. There goes that flare. If you place a move order, then place the building, you can build things more quickly because you don't have to walk all the way to them. The automated pathfinding of this game is going to put you square on top of what you're building practically, and then that adds a lot of walking time. Whereas if you move like there and then build the mechs, you can cut off 2 or 3 seconds on every structure, which adds up to minutes moving on through the game. There goes the ACU, which is actually going to walk into the factory build space in order to reclaim those trees, and then back up and build it. Much better use of this commander would be moving it over and catching those tanks that are coming into the base. Looks like he is going to be doing just that. So as we're moving on, it looks like Massive is starting to pull ahead ever so slightly, though. Horror of horrors! He is overflowing between 9 and 30 mass per tick as he struggles to have enough power to spend it all. That is a bad place to have your economy, but 39, his economy is. Cabbage just ticking over to 39, and he is in a power stall, but at least he's using all of his mass. This is the one bad thing about having power stall, is that it costs power to build power, and quite a lot of power at that. So if you do put 3, 4, 5 engineers on a power spam, you're going to end up stalling harder than you were in the first place until you can get your first half dozen or so power generators built. Yep, there is the power stall emote coming out of the woodwork. That is an appropriate response to such a thing. We do have a T1 bomber out. It looks like air control does belong to Cabbage, at least by straight interceptor count. We are starting to see the first combat on the front edge of the right-hand flank. Point defense is going to go down next to those mass extractors, an excellent deterrent for Auroras. Of course, we do know that the T1 point defense is capable of killing many Auroras before it goes down, mostly due to the paper armor that only provides, what, 140 HP? Yes, 140 HP for the protection of that tank. It's actually less than half the HP of some of the other factions' tanks. I think there are a couple that get up into the, no, they're all in the 200 to 300 range, so it would be about exactly half the HP. Cabbage has got another 3 land factories up on the left-hand side, so I think that will give him a bit of a production advantage, though he is still quite heavily power stalled indeed. Going to be a total of 10 land factories. If we queue back down to Massive, he has got a paltry 8 factories, although, yeah, that is only, like, what, 20% less? So not that big of a deal, I suppose. He does have quite a bit of power at his disposal now, and he is assisting a T2 mass extractor upgrade quite heavily. He already has one. 43 mass to 38 mass per tick. I don't believe that Cabbage has a T2 mass extractor as of yet. Very surprising to me that nobody has gone for the islands yet, and as soon as I make that comment, I see a transport over on the left-hand side making the drop. 4 mass extractors, a quite decent amount of reclaim on each of those islands, and then the added benefit of being able to build a sneaky TML or airbase or some such thing over on the edge and then smack your opponent upside the head with it when he least suspects it. A lot of people just kind of ignore the side islands, but you definitely do need to scout those as well, because what happens if your opponent builds a T2 air factory on the outside edge and then just stockpiles fighter bombers? You have no idea they even exist until there are 17 Mercies imploding into your face. Although I guess that would be more accurately stated as exploding, because Mercies definitely do not create miniature black holes. That's kind of the job of the Aeon TMD. I'm going to get off of my rambles. We've got a pretty weak collection of tanks on the front line for Massive. I do think we have a fairly significant unit count advantage on the north side, but let me queue up over here just to make sure that that is indeed the case. Got 44 tanks in the purple color, and we've got 57 tanks in the blue, so I was correct on that assumption. Might be trying for a little bit of a run-by over here, but I'm a little more interested in the bases because there it is. It's about time for a T2 HQ. So purple is making that a run. Looks like we've got no such thing planned on the north side, continuing with the T1 spam with an ever-increasing amount of factories. However, the ASCU has begun the T2 upgrade and is sitting at about 20%. So we'll start seeing some T2 buildings coming online in just a little bit. I'm not actually sure how much of an advantage the T2 is going to give to Massive. He may be pushing for an earlier T3. Harbies would be quite strong indeed versus the Auroras. It's like 2 shots for each tank. They're dead. However, the Obsidian is going to have the Percival versus T1 problem because the T2 Aeon tank, I suppose you could go for Blazes. Blazes would be maybe even more damage efficient in this case, which would be a weird thing to say of the T2 assault tanks, which are typically weaker. But to get back on my original drift, we are looking at a tank that only shoots once every 4 seconds and it deals 400 damage per shot. Therefore, it will be overkilling by 260 DPS, only killing a T1 tank once per 4 seconds. In the meantime, those Auroras are going to be doing a pretty mean amount of damage to the very slow-moving Obsidians. So again, I am not sure exactly how well these are going to fare. According to Plasma Wolf, single shot from the Harpy does kill a tank. 375 DPS, firing slightly more than once a second. Oh, yeah. You are absolutely correct. Sorry about that. Okay, so there are Obsidians moving up to the front. Yes, Barago in the chat. I would skip T2 and go straight to T3. The Harbinger, funnily enough, actually does about the same amount of overkill if that stat is true. I think I'm remembering those numbers correctly. However, the Harbinger moves faster, has greater range, has more HP, and is able to kill a T1 tank less than once per second, or more than once per second, as opposed to the Obsidian, which only eliminates a T1 unit once every 4 seconds. So even though each individual shot overkills by about the same amount, it is going to absolutely decimate the number of T1s very, very quickly indeed. We may have a little bit of a fight on our hands on the south side. We've got 5 engineers dropped, immediately built well, that is an anti-air turret. I was about to say it was a point defense. Blue may have no idea whatsoever, no he does not, that there is a drop on that side as well. So both of the islands are going to get claimed, although there may be a fight on the south, so I'm happy about that. Meanwhile, on the left-hand side, we have got an attempt at an Oblivion turret, but the T2 engineer is going to be sniped off. The amount of tanks is too low, I think, to get close to that base. We now do have a T2 HQ online air-wise as well. So there's a T2 transport. Interesting move. What is that going to be? Going to be an arty drop. Whether that's in the base or on the island, it definitely has the potential to eliminate some eco and even up these odds, because despite the fact that the T2 is not going to be very mass efficient in this particular game, it does look like Massive has been able to come out ahead in both of these fights. There goes the T2 transports. Cabbage is dropping in the back end of the base, and Massive does not have radar coverage until the very edge of his base. Very interesting. All right, it is now known that there is a base down here, but 3 tanks online should be able to relatively easily shut down that whole affair. We do have a T1 point defense building as well, and Cabbage has got his mass extractors coming online. He definitely needs to drop these artillery as soon as possible, because the quicker he gets them into battle, the quicker that Gambit will pay off. We do have a T2 point defense coming online in the front end. Again, the story is the same. The T2 point defense will massively overkill any of the Aeon T1 that is coming across, and it will, of course... that is a troop movement. Nope, doesn't look like Massive sees it, and now he does. So we'll see if he makes a quick response to that. To be honest, I would be dropping the T1 artillery up in the back end. That looks like an engineer drop coming to the other edge. And now the artillery is on the ground. I would definitely be on the move with that so that you can do as much damage as possible. If you're able to spare the APM when you're in a game like this, I'm actually going to cue this in right here so you can see what is going on that side. When you do have a unit such as the Fervor at your disposal, the damage output is rather high. However, the travel time of the projectile is quite long. So the problem that you run into is that you deal way too much damage to a unit that's already dead. So you want to target down a mass extractor, let it get a couple of firing cycles off. When you think it's fired enough projectiles to kill whatever it is that you're aiming at, you retarget. You could have killed all 4 of those T2 mass extractors with the damage that was dealt to just the 2. Alternatively, you can select all your artillery, select all 4 mass extractors with an attack order on shift, then press G, and it will split up the attack order evenly through the artillery and kill off all of the things. Both of those ways will work significantly better than what we just saw. So, speaking of things that we just saw, there was a TAC missile that just came across and sniped off a T2 mass extractor over on that edge. Nicely done from Cabbage. We do have a TMD up in front of the T2 power generator. If you're going to build a power generator, it is always a good idea to queue up a TMD either immediately before or immediately after said thing being built, because then you can't get your T2 power sniped, which sucks. In 100% of cases, there is never a good time to get your power sniped. TAC missile moving downward. I don't know what that's aiming for. If it's a T1 Mex, that makes me sad, because the T1 Mex is far, far cheaper to replace than that TAC missile was to build. So not exactly a brilliant use of TACs, in my opinion. Cabbage has got that much range on his TML, so he could actually be going for some slightly more valuable targets, such as killing off the point events in that base. I think he could wing, he could definitely kill that one, he could probably wing that one with Massive's range on the TMD. Oh, that's close, never mind. The TMD would probably trigger, but still, there are better things that you could be killing. We got a Harbinger on the field. We do have another artillery drop in the back end, dealing damage to those point events. Once again, relatively bad micro on the pickup for mass extractors there. T2 transport may in fact get out alive. I am not 100% sure though. It appears that the Aeon transport does not have an anti-air weapon like some of the other factions do, which is quite unfortunate indeed. Artillery gonna sit still and die hopelessly as those T2 mass extractors survive. A single T1 bomber out of the factory now. If a hover bomb can be arranged, and it can, the last artillery can be eliminated. So I believe what happened here, there was another drop scheduled. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it come from? Cotton Eye Joe, that was a little bit mixed up there, but you get the point. I think that transport actually flew over flak. I don't see a wreckage, but otherwise we would be seeing artillery in the base. Nope, it was picked up on the outside edge, I think. Nope, that was returning. Something was picked up. There were 2 transports and now there are none. However, there are some T2 gunships and Slitwinds online. Gunships may be able to be of use later on in this game, but right now the strategic targets are relatively well covered by mobile flak and or overwhelming interceptor coverage. So there may be a little bit of an issue right now. And speaking of flak, T2 gunship's going to move in on auto target, and the flak is going to eat them alive. There are no more gunships to be had this day, no sir. But there is a miasma for some weird reason. I could almost understand if that was a, hold on, a clink hammer or whatever the T2 artillery for Cybern is called. It's not a Medusa. It is eluding me right now. Anyway, what those two units have in common is that they have a very large area of effect and therefore are quite good indeed at killing clumps of units. So you have a T2 artillery, the other guy's got clumps of units. Yeah, T2 arty might actually be a decent thing. The problem with the miasma is that it does way more damage than a clink hammer per shot. However, it does not have much area of effect at all. So you're not going to be killing off a whole lot of units with that, hate to say. I think that was probably a bad investment in mass. But maybe it can do some damage over time. Maybe it can take care of some things. We will have to wait and see. That is a hell of a firing squad doing a whole lot of nothing thanks to that hill. For the love of all that is holy, please, folks, check your terrain before you wreck yourself. Another miasma up on this side and a third going into place. Why? What is this even? Your opponent has T3 land. What is your plan? What is your plan with this? The Harbinger can casually walk up and kill every single one of your artillery. He has gone into turtle mode and he is not playing a turtle faction and he is using bad units to turtle on top of that. Why is life this way sometimes? We do have Harbingers out though. 69 mass per tick on 1.3k power income, 1.8k now that that T2 finished. I think it was that one maybe? Yes, something like that. So roughly even on power output and on mass as it turns out. I guess Cabbage was stalling and I did not take a look-see at that. Yes, that is the case. 10,000 reclaim on Cabbage's dial. And holy smokes, he's stalling on power again, and he's losing his mass extractor in the back. 15k on massive for reclaim. That was a nasty, nasty drop indeed. Sometimes a T1 transport is all that you need in this world to wreak havoc across your opponent's back line. T3 sniper bots now moving in. Of course, that artillery is going to go down. Cabbage fleeing for his very life, as well he should. And T2 point defense trying to do a little damage on these units. I do believe that with the Harbingers coming out, this will be contained. The left-hand side is going to continue to be a problem. But as things stand, they're actually fairly even on mass, even with the drop that has already happened. However, with these other units moving in, we've got another group of T1 over on this side. Actually, that's flares. That was effectively a ghetto gunship that just dropped its payload, although it will end up killing off two T1 mass extractors there. Lost another T2, two T2s over on that side, and then the Harbinger is now moving into the base. We're seeing the number drop lower and lower for Cabbage as time goes on. He's now at roughly half the eco of his opponent, and still dropping. This is a total crying shame to watch. Another T2 mechs falling to the onslaught. This looks like something that I would do. My early game goes okay. I do just fine until I start getting a little bit laid back and playing passively. And then my face just gets straight up wrecked. And I don't know what to do to stop it. Got a T1 drop on the back end as well for Cabbage. He's actually still trying to poke and prod at things, but I don't think that handful of artillery is going to be sufficient to kill off what he needs to even up this game. Lost all 4 T2 mass extractors in the core base, knocking him down to 37 mass per tick versus 97. Not a good place to be, as the, those sprites are moving up as well. So, yeah, fun stuff, fun stuff. I think it might be time for a comm drop, bro. Just go for that T3 upgrade on the ACU as quickly as you can, and then hop on board and move into the other base. What's the worst that could happen, right? Right. That power generator is probably going to bother me. No, it may actually be... No, I was right. It's off center. Why did he build it off center? No. But he needs the power to keep his shielding online, so I suppose that we can forgive him building the power generator in the first place. It is better that it is built than were it not built. But please, please, next time, check your adjacency. That hurts my soul. 3 Harbingers up on the left side. We do have an Oblivion turret going down, but I don't know where Cabbage is getting the eco for that. Unless it is from Reclaim, but I guess not particularly. Got T1 Engineers trying to claim all these mass extractor spots. We are seeing some mass come in from the T2 Mech's Reclaim, but in reality, when you have taken a hit like this, you're better off pausing your production to a certain degree. Of course, you do still need to get some units out in order to claim, or keep control of the map, I should say. But you want to be cycling this Reclaim from the T2 Mass Extractors into more T2 Mass Extractors, so you aren't offline for too terribly long. Of course, if you do have T2 Engineers, which it doesn't appear that there are many of, if any of. If you have T2 Engineers, it is really, really good to build T2 mechs on the wreckage, because then you get a T2 Mass Extractor at half the build time and roughly half the cost. You're able to get your eco scaled back up significantly more quickly. That was a lovely loss of 4 Harbingers on the left. They wandered a little bit too far forward without reinforcement. So between the T1 and the shielding, they were able to stop those Sons of Guns and kill them. So now there is more Reclaim online for Massive to get a hold of. To be completely honest, I am mildly surprised that Cabbage is still alive. I think Massive would have done well to attempt a snipe or some overpowering move in that time slot, but I think that there were just a few too many units out for Cabbage for him to effectively push across the whole map. What I think, though, is that this group should be kiting around to the north. Looks like there's only 4 T1 mass, or not mass, 5 T1 point defense that are guarding that access point. A couple of T1 artillery, you could kill the Sons of Guns, and there is only a single Harbinger to guard this edge. But his choices are his own, so we shall observe and not hate on him too terribly hard. Are there any T3 mass extractors yet? There are quite a few T2 in the back line for Massive, but I don't think he's actually sprung for a T3 yet. I don't even see one in process. We do have a T3 power generator. He's abandoned the T2 power build. Another T3 PGen going down. Adjacent to an air factory, we can safely assume that that is going to lead to T3 air. We do have a T2 transport over on the left, hauling a couple of Harbingers. I think he was planning to drop somewhere in the back, but then realized how many Swift Winds were over on that edge and reconsidered his life choices. Pro tip, if you're loading up units in a transport, don't place the drop order over open water by accident. Actually, it's more of a common thing with a ferry order, but if you try to drop land units in the water, it ends badly. They do the explodimication dance. The transport is too dumb to reissue the order in a location that is better suited to the land units. We do have Harbingers dropping on the right side island. I don't think there's anything there that will be able to stop them, so bye-bye eco on the outside edge for Cabbage, who is down at 53 mass per tick against 164, but a good portion of that is due to a massive 600 range power stall. Holy hell, you need to get that in check, man, before it kills ya. We got T2 power generators going down. T3 shielding is a bad idea. Next to T2 power, the T2 shield will cover it just as well, and the T3 costs more mass and more power to run once it is completed. He does see his units slowly but surely disappearing on the bottom edge. He does have a couple of Harbingers to drop, along with a gunship to send over that away. He is sending the entire Air Force, it would appear, which does leave his flank exposed to a certain degree, but I guess he does need to make a strong response in order to keep that island, because a significant chunk of his economy exists on that edge. So gunship is in, Harbingers are in, need to focus fire that son of a diddly down, but the T2 mechs is going to fall. We got a points vets getting knocked offline, and then the Harbinger is out of the way. However, I think the trade, 652 mass, 652 mass, So that means that the 2 Harbingers in mass cost slightly more than the T2 mass extractor does to rebuild. So if there were a T2 engineer out there that was able to rebuild on the wreck, you would get about 3 times the mass out of those 2 wrecks. Oh, that was a close snag. No! That is a shame when you see a missed opportunity like that. That could have done a pretty significant amount of damage if it kited around the outside edge, but unfortunately, it was not meant to be. We do have, is that attack missile and an artillery shot in similar timing? I think it is. So the attack missile is apparently aimed at something too close to that volcano to get through. More Harbinger drops up on the north side. Successful raiding all the way around for Massive, who, though his opponent has climbed back up the ladder to 102 mass income, is still rocking nearly double that amount at 186 per tick. 2 T1 point events are not going to be sufficient to stall out a couple of Harbingers, as they do both out damage, out HP, and outrange the T1 PD. I think they outrange. They either outrange or they have the same range. I'm not completely sure, but the T2 gunships might have something else to say about that. I would highly encourage Cabbage to exploit his air control while he has it, trying to snipe off some other things, but I don't think he's going to have that much of an opportunity to, and we are on the way to a T3 Air HQ. Also, a Galactic Colossus is being built by Massive. So I think we are rapidly approaching the end point of this game, because I just don't see where Cabbage has the tools at his disposal to stop these things from happening. Massive just has too much mass, and Cabbage does not have enough units. I do like the save on the south side, though. It is nice to see that staying intact. Looking at the air forces, let me drop over to Cabbage. We've got a total of 20 Swiftwinds and 12 Interceptors. Cabbage throwing out the GG, well played. And we've got 40 Interceptors and 1 Swiftwind on the south. Is that going to be an honorable bow out? I do not know. By the way, why TML T1 mechs? I was wondering that myself. Thought it was T2, I think is what he meant to say there. Alright, the ACU is dropped on the front line, right in the middle of the mayhem, just as the Galactic Colossus finishes. So that will be a quick zap from existence, and Massive takes the win. I think that Cabbage did a rather fine job considering the rank disadvantage that he was at. I think he could have been a little bit more proactive. I see a lot of my own flaws in him, kind of just sitting back and taking things as they come, playing reactively instead of proactively. But I think he has a pretty solid baseline. He was up in eco with Massive for most of the early portion of the game. He got knocked down a peg, of course, due to raiding, but I think with a very slight amount of improvement, he would be doing damn fine. And that is going to wrap up that game. Well done, Massive, as he moves on in the winner's bracket. That is going to wrap everything up for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, feel free to drop a like and share it with someone. If you want to support the channel, catch the streams, or join the Discord, check out the links in the description. Thank you all for being at least partially insane, and I will see you in the next one.